Yep, I'm back. I certainly do appreciate anybody and everybody that's out there waiting for this video. A two-part video. The first part is the tabletop, and the second part are the legs. I'm using this mold to make the top of an end table. I got some melamine wood from Lowe's Hardware. I think most big box stores have it. And cut the strips. This tape is called tuck tape, and I'm basically tucking it in the corners and just using a spatula to shove it in there, then cutting it with the razor blade. This is to help seal it in place. And so anyway, there's a lot of videos on how to make a mold. I'm not going to go into that, and I got this from different videos, so it wasn't my idea or creation. Well, it was my creation, but it wasn't all my ideas. But basically, the most important thing is to simply seal it so it doesn't leak, but at the same time make it where you can tear it apart. As you'll notice earlier, I had screwing it together just to pull it tight, and then taped it all up. This is actually the wood that I'm working with. This came from Italy, is where the olive wood came from. And I'm just getting the bark off the edges of it, which after the fact I realized I didn't have to put as much effort into it as I thought, because it's not really going to show. But I did clean it all up. I really like the olive wood. I like the way it looks, and I think that it has some great character. This was one slab of wood with the bark on both sides, and I cut it down the middle to butt it up against the sidewalls, and the resin will be poured in this section here, and you'll see in just a minute when I put it in the mold. You'll get the gist of what I'm doing. But I did want to get all the loose stuff off of it. So now it's up against the sides. I actually put a little gap in it because I wanted a little black edge to be on the side. So I'm mixing up the total boat. This is slow curing, 1 to 3. And I have my gloves and everything else. Also, if you'll notice the little paint paddles that are underneath the mold, this was done so that it would be level, and I checked the level before doing it. And even though you get it level, it's still going to kind of run over a little bit if you fill it up. So here again, I'm just mixing, trying not to make a mess. And I am inside because this is actually back in December and January, the first of the year, and this was cold weather, and I just couldn't do it outside. It would take forever. And I'm just kind of showing the little bubble level that I've got on my phone, which actually worked out fine. I played with it a little bit more before I started pouring. And I knew I was going to take multiple mixtures to make it fill up. And I'm kind of cutting out some of that, but poured it up to the edge, and I knew that it would seep under. You'd be surprised how I'm using syringes here to move it from the center to the side, and I have some more to pour in. But I haven't been doing this in a while, and I am like so far out of practice, and at the same time I never was that great to begin with, so this may not be a very good video just from that point alone. But it was a lot of fun doing this, and I think it turned out good. This is a two-part video, by the way, which one part is making this tabletop. The second part is making the legs for it. So please stay tuned to part 2. I hope that it won't be too far away, but it may very well be a week or two before this legs part comes out. Just topping it off, I filled up the sides and filled everything. It's starting to seep over a little bit on the right, and just kind of moving it, taking a little bit out of the middle. For some reason, the part that I put on the sides seemed to be trying to fill up the center. Now I'm just getting rid of some bubbles with a lighter. So this is it. I let it dry, and it took a day or so, and then I took it to a cabinet shop and had them sand it for me of the surface of it, and then I did the trimming, the cutting of the ends to square everything up. And just using a skill saw and a guide and some clamps, just holding it up off the table. Here again, real easy, simple way to do it, not really trying to make anything, and I'm just cutting a sliver off to square it up. Had some wrinkles from the tape. Actually, I cut the ends completely off, that's right, on the end, but not the sides. And that is the front side, or the top side there that you're looking at, and the side that I was cutting was the back. That's why it looks a little rougher, and I hadn't sanded or did very much to it, just checking everything, making sure it's square and looking decent. Checking it 1,000 times. You know the old saying, check it 1,000 and cut it once, because you don't have a second chance to cut it, especially when it comes to putting stuff back on it. And then that was the edge that I'm just trimming and making a little bit thinner, but I knew that the sides would not be real smooth because of the tape and the wrinkles in the tape. But this was just all part of it. And then I'll cut this other side, doing pretty much the same thing. I think this time I set it on some wood instead of using the clamps. They seem to be kind of sketchy. The measuring is a little bit hard because I had to kind of square it up. It must have floated a little bit on this particular side. The numbers wasn't really adding up. I had to kind of do it by eye, and that's probably the most important part, that it looks right. And this should take care of the final side. I got the thickness of the black to be the same. And this is the tabletop here, or the top side of the tabletop. It's the tabletop, but that's the top of the top. And I'm just going to start some sanding, and not going to really bore y'all with all that. Well, I had a couple of little pinholes in the tabletop in the corner with the resin, and so I decided to put a little bit of black Star Bond in the holes and spray some hardener on it, and then go ahead and sand that, make it look smooth. I started my sanding with 80 grit, and then went to 100, and then went to 120 and stopped. The finish that I'm putting on it is really, you don't have to sand it any more than the 120. And this is pretty much what it looks like. It's just kind of a haze of everything, but everything feels good. And I'm just cleaning this off with really just a dry microfiber towel, and blowing it off some. And this is just another grit, probably the 120. And the edges, doing the same thing to them. I bet y'all figured that one out though. Kind of rounded the edges too. They were pretty sharp, and I just didn't want anybody to walk by it or something like that and catch their pants on it or leg or whatever. I mean, it is an end table. Okay, that heater in there is probably a dead giveaway that this was not in the last couple of weeks. And you can see the saw marks. I did show this just for this reason. And I believe this is 80 or 100. And I did have a place that was a little bit deeper, and so I had to kind of work it a little bit more than I expected. And this is a DA sander that does a good job of not showing marks and stuff like that. Now back inside doing the finish on it, and the amount that I just poured is way too much. That's enough to do the back and the front of the board, and once you pour it on one side, you really can't get it off to get it to the other side. But live and learn. It's expensive, but it goes a long way as far as spreading it. Just the amount that I wiped off the can and wiped the edges was very little on the rag, but it worked. And now I'm just spreading it and letting it soak into the wood. It's not going to soak into the resin, but it will put a good shine, or in this case I'm looking for a semi-gloss, and the name of this stuff is Rubio Monocoat Oil Plus 2C Pure. And like I said, it is expensive, but it goes a long ways. At this point, I'm really just, I really could be done, but I'm just trying to hope that it's going to soak up more, and I just keep wiping it wherever, and pretty much it doesn't. So I didn't want to scrape it back into the cup and try to do it. I should have, but I didn't want to contaminate anything. And so I started with the bottom of it, and now this is the top. I flipped it over and just showing a little bit more about how I mixed it using syringes. This time I'm really using small amounts. There's just no sense in wasting it, and I basically scraped all the other off and let it completely come to a dry and actually you wind up sanding any irregular shapes or anything you got. So it's better to scrape every bit of it off, or not scrape, but with that little plastic spatula, and get it all clean. Now I'm using the right amount, or the amount that I think is the right amount, and so the correct amount is 2 to 1. With this larger can, you put 2 of those for one of the activator or accelerator, part B. And like I said, the amount I used, you're thinking it's not going to go very far, and it's not that much, but it definitely will. This is the smaller can, which is the lesser amount of the mixture. And then I just use a paint stick to stir it. Mix it real good. And at this point you can see I have a whole lot less than what I poured on the back of it. I left the cup sitting there because I wanted to get every bit out of it that I could. And basically you just spread it around, and what I found out on the other side was with the extra, instead of worrying about the edges, it seemed to be just easier to go ahead as you start getting it all off, just dipping the rag into the little puddle you have. And see, this came out a lot better. I'm pretty much just soaking in all of it. There's just a little bit, and then the reason I did that was it was just running down the sides. But anyway, this went a lot better. Again, I'm just looking for a satin finish, not a super high gloss. If I was doing that, I would have just used the resin, but I wanted to do something a little different, something that kind of looks more like regular furniture, if there's such a thing. Well, you know what I'm saying. I just didn't want it to have a real high gloss, and so it turned out really good. So it's actually sitting up on a couple of cans, and I set it down to get flush on the table, because one of the things you have to do is after about 5 to 10 minutes, and some people say 10 to 15, but I found it was way too tacky at that length of time. But you really kind of buff it with a clean rag and wipe it really uh, firmly, I guess you'd say. You don't want any kind of ridges or anything like that laying up on it. So you're kind of buffing it down. It's a wax base that helps your mind think about what you're doing, and basically you put a liquid on and it's kind of drying, so you don't want it to be puddly or water spots looking kind of thing. So you buff it real good for 5 or so minutes. These are just some pictures that didn't really make it in the video, and I wanted to kind of slow it down, give you a chance to see them. The sheen and everything just turned out perfect. Just remember, God is good.